Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We are again with Brian Wallace. And this time, as we continue in the leadership module, we are talking about how to build trust. Essentially, we're talking about as we make relationships and deepen those relationships in our small group, how do we build trust with those that we're leading? So, welcome, Brian. It's good to see you again.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to this.
Brian, one of the things about being in a leadership relationship is that it changes things a little bit compared to when we're just friends with somebody at church. But how? What would you say changes when we become a leader in a group as we take on that extra responsibility? How is that a different kind of relationship than just kind of the typical friendship of the person that we're, chatting with at the coffee station while we're there on Sunday?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that as you enter into a leadership relationship with people, you're also engaged in a relationship with every other leader they've had. And so very rarely do people come with a clean understanding of what this relationship is going to be. They come with past hurts. They come with present expectations. They come with future hopes. Sometimes because they've had bad relationships with spiritual leaders or even great relationships with spiritual leaders, and they bring those things with them. And the tricky part is for all of us when we enter into new relationships with leaders, our expectations are often unknown to ourselves. And we're unaware of our hurt or are unaware of our hope, and they're certainly not spoken. So we rarely go into a relationship with a small group leader or a new pastor and say, here's what I'm expecting our relationship to be. But we encounter it because we bump into a hurt or a sorrow or a sadness. And because we're human as leaders, we're going to make mistakes. And that is part of that relationship. So being aware of the dynamics, the complexity of dynamic in a relationship as you're taking on new roles of leadership in people's lives, it's really important. So starting right away with building trust could be identifying expectations. Hey, what are you looking for in a small group? Tell me some of the experiences that you've had that were really great for you. Have you ever had any hard experiences? I want to avoid some of those things with you. So again, good communication, good clarity, receiving people's hopes and joys, receiving their past and not experiencing it as a demand. All those things help really build trust in a relationship. And I would say this, for the long term, I've never had a relationship as a small group leader or a spiritual leader where at some point I didn't have to either tell the truth about something challenging or ask forgiveness. And so it's good to recognize that that's part of healthy human relationships in general. And the exciting thing is asking forgiveness and telling the truth is actually part of the relationship building and part of the trust development as well. So.
Brian, we introduced that word trust, and you've used it a few times here. Why is trust so central when we're talking about a leadership relationship?
Well, when people enter into their church, they're dealing with both theological truths, but they're dealing with their life. And spiritual life and growth always involves some kind of risk. Transformation requires risk and it requires some sense of safety in relationship or trust in order to engage those risks to keep saying, or rather keep growing. So for instance, to confess to a small group, hey, I'm really struggling in my relationship to my children. I could use some prayer. That requires that I trust these people, that they're not going to judge me. They're not going to look down on me. They're not going to think I'm an idiot. That there's some relational safety there. And the leader has a huge part to play in developing the kind of trust necessary so that person's safe enough to tell the truth. It's like, hey, I trust my leader to create an environment where I can be small, I can be big, I can be strong, I can be weak,
Yeah.
I can have questions. I don't have to be perfect.
No, that's right on. That makes a lot of sense to me, Brian. And I feel like you're doing an honest and helpful job of setting out how complicated this can be. I sometimes say ministry would be easy if people weren't involved, and
Exactly.
this brings that to the surface, because not only do they have their background and their experiences, we have our own, our own sins, our own foibles, our own personality. And all of the complexity of two people growing to trust each other. Is there anything you can give us that would help us kind of zoom in a little bit on a couple of things we can do to make ourselves more worthy of trust, to kind of grow into the kind of people who merit the kind of trust that's necessary for this kind of leadership?
Well, the first thing I might say is it might be a sideways answer to that question, which would be, don't expect your relationships to always be smooth. And what I mean by that is when I encounter bumps or I've not met someone's expectation, if I'm not surprised by that, I'm probably not going to respond in defensiveness. I'm going to respond in openness and being able to say, you're right, I really made that mistake. It wasn't intended, but I can see how that hurt you, and I'm really sorry for that. Being able to not be expecting myself to be perfect can help build some of that trust. So I can stay inside myself.
Yeah, I think especially for people who are relatively new to spiritual leadership, I think that's one of the hardest pieces to get over is that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to need to ask for forgiveness. You're going to miss expectations. You kind of have to know that as flawed people leading, that's going to be part of it. And then what's so crucial is what that reconciliation looks like, exactly. What that restoration of relationship looks like. And I know from my experience, both in ministry and in life, that there's something even more resilient and strong about a reconciled relationship than there is one that's only had smooth sailing and never had to work through a difficult patch like that.
Exactly. So it's a normal human relationship. And I've never had one that didn't require some truth telling, some forgiveness, some, hey, tell me what you meant by that, or I'm just, or minor, I'm sorry. Hey, I wasn't ready for you when you got here. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. But it communicates that, hey, I'm not expecting you to be perfect. I'm not expecting myself to be perfect either.
That's good.
I would say that the second piece of truth telling is not just that normal relationship, but trust building. It's acknowledging and paying attention to people before they notice it. So when someone has a question and I can tell they're wrestling with it, I can say, hey, that's a good question. I think we all need to wrestle with that. Thank you for bringing that up. So what it's doing is saying, hey, your perspective on this passage or on this discussion is really valid. And I'm telling them ahead of time that I think that's a valid one, even if I disagree.
Yeah.
That builds trust. It says, hey, you're going to take me seriously, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. And that's a trust building experience.
I feel like when I'm around people where I know they're going to view me generously, that they're going to bring to the surface the parts that are my best. And when there's confusion, assume the best about what I'm saying or doing. It's so much easier to trust that person in a relationship.
Oh, yeah. You just put your finger on a really key thing, Drew. In all the premarital counseling my wife and I do, all the marriage counseling we do, that's one of the things that would save so many marriages is if they just assume the best of each other. It's like, hey, you didn't mean to make me feel small. Now, it doesn't mean you didn't make me feel small, but you didn't mean to. Right. And so, just that assumption of the best of the people around you will really help build trust.
That's rich, Brian. All right. Anything else you'd like to share with us in terms of building trust?
No, I mean, it might be a great experience or exercise for new leaders to think about the leaders they've had that they've trusted. What helped build that trust? What made them feel safe and at ease with them? I bet there's some reconciliation stories. I bet there's some ease in the leader that they experienced that helped all that make sense to them.
It's so good. Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate it.
Sure thing.